Good afternoon. This is a podcast on forging your path and stabilizing your careers in government and IT. I'm your host, Tamara Wells Lee. I work in senior management with the federal government, and thank you for joining us today for what I hope will be a conversation, if you will, with Ebony Gray and Kevin Wayne Johnson, who collectively bring a wealth of experience and expertise to the topic at hand. So let's begin, of course, by having each of you just tell the listeners a little about yourselves, your background, and how you got to the point of writing your books. So I'll begin with you, Ebony.
Okay. So my name is Dr. Ebony Gray. I am the government contracting and federal employment coach and consultant. I have served in the federal government for the past 24 years of my life. It seems like all my life. I started as an Air Force veteran and I transitioned into a government contracting, and then I went into politics for about a year, and then I transitioned into government employment for the past 10 years. It started because I felt like, especially as a military veteran, I needed community, right? I needed support. Once you get the job, what do you do? Like, how do you network? How do you elevate in your federal career? Plus, I talked to a lot of transitioning veterans that just were confused, like, what's the next steps? How do I get a federal job? So that guided myself and my co-author, Dr. April Dobson, who, quick history, we actually started the military together. She was my dorm mate in tech school. We wrote the book together to help people navigate into the federal government and also thrive once they get into the federal government.
Great, and that seems like it's an excellent resource. And I hope our listeners, after hearing this conversation today, that they certainly will go and check out your book. Now let's go to you, Mr. Johnson.
Okay, well, I'm Kevin Wayne Johnson. I'm a native of Richmond, Virginia. And after I graduated from college, Virginia Commonwealth University, my mom says, you should go work for the federal government. And I said, yes, ma'am. So I applied. Things worked out. I still remember sitting before a 3-person panel as a part of the interview, and everything went well. And ultimately, I was accepted into the Defense Logistics Agency, what they call the Centralized Intern Development Program. I was one of 25 incoming GS5 employees across the entire country, and I ended up staying 34 years as a frontline leader, a mid-level leader, and a senior level leader. Department of Defense and Department of Treasury had a wealth of sponsors and champions that looked after me, that coached me, mentored me, showed me the way, and I'll always be eternally grateful. I retired 7 years ago, and now in this season, I'm pouring into the federal workforce as a trainer, as a coach, teacher, and mentor.
Wonderful. And hearing you say you're from Virginia, I have Virginia roots myself. I'm from Central Virginia, and that seems to be the standard response when parents tell you to get a job with the federal government. So I too moved to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, although I started in the private sector and then I went to the government. But I just want to dive right into this conversation by sort of setting the stage for what I think many would say is the current state of our job environment. And just indulge me for a moment, if you will, because I want to read a bit from what summarizes what this current state actually is. Job growth and the idea of career stability has changed over the last few decades. Many companies and small businesses, they've had to pivot, or they simply didn't survive the pandemic. There is this concept called the Great Resignation of 2022. And it really, I think, caused a lot of those individuals in the job market to seek other opportunities. And that is what is bringing us here today. Opportunities in the IT sphere, opportunities in the government, also entrepreneurship. But there also been recent changes in the area of matters pertaining to DEIA, instability with the job market. It really is forcing or generating more interest in being civil servants and looking to the federal government for the next career move. So I guess I just want to start by asking you, Dr. Gray, does that resonate with you, what I just said? And if so, if you could just speak about how you can relate to that and what you're seeing.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing 2025 is the Great Resignations, right? In retirements, right? We're transitioning in the government. We got people going out. Remember, just came from the pandemic and COVID. Many people are looking for remote work. The government is now transitioning back to in office.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a big transition, which means that we have to start today with succession planning. How are we preparing people? How are we preparing the next generation? How are we recruiting and doing outreach to make sure that once we have that big turnover, we actually have the backfills for all those positions? So right now, in a lot of government agencies, we're strategizing on that succession planning. What next? What are we doing? Thinking about funding, right? Do we have the funding to actually hire all the people that we need? Because people have to leave before we can backfill and hire. And also, my focus is policies and strategic planning. So do we have the policies and the SOPs in place, the standard operating procedures, to actually train people, right? So when somebody retires, you can pick up that SOP and actually know that job step by step. So that's what I see that's trending in the future of government.
And thank you for that. And Mr. Johnson, I would ask you to approach it from the standpoint, I think you mentioned you're 7 years retired. So looking at the job market from that perspective, and sort of piggybacking on some of what Dr. Gray has said in the statement that I read, what about that resonates with you, or any additional insight that you can provide?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to take a look at the reality that we have 5 generations of people in the workplace right now. And those that were born before 45, they're working because they like it or is their financial need. But they're probably not going to be around beyond 5 years. And then the next generation below that is the baby boomers. The majority of us have already retired. And many of us will be retiring probably within the next 3 to 4 years. So that's a huge number of federal employees that will be exiting. And Dr. Gray hit it on the head around succession planning. Mm-hmm. How do we prepare, and why should we prepare? The bench of the next generation of leaders is very, very important. So having those conversations with our human resources professionals who always tell us about how much effort and energy they put into recruiting the best and brightest talent that's out there, but then they come into the federal workplace, and if they're not treated with respect, and if we don't provide development opportunities and resources and training and tools and systems to succeed, they are much quicker to vote with their feet than the previous generations. So, we're dealing with all of these different dynamics, but it really comes down to recognizing the audience that's there. There are fewer of us that are working because the pool has shrunken, because the baby boomers have retired, and the millennials are looking at the horizon, and within 10 years, they'll start to retire. So that's how we have to transition our thinking and ask the younger generation, what do you think? What are your ideas? What are your opinions in terms of retention? Because we put so much effort into recruiting, so it has to be balanced.
And I agree with that, everything that you all said in terms of the, I know succession planning is one piece of it. And I know you just said we spend too much emphasis on the recruiting, but looking at it in terms of someone who wants to get into the federal government, I want to sort of take the conversation to how would you advise them to get to that point? If someone is not worked for the federal government before, like I came from the private sector, it's great that we have the succession plans, but to get that next generation of workers and leaders into the workplace, how do we go about doing that and encouraging them and advising them on a process that could seem overwhelming to those who may not be familiar with it? And I'll pose that to you, Dr. Gray.
So first things first, you have to go out, buy my book, A Guide to Unlocking Federal Employment. We lay out the foundation, but just step by step, network. You have to, your network directly impacts your net worth. So no matter who you are, you need to know somebody, have a stakeholder, have a gatekeeper on that other side that can help you. Now you're going to say, well, how do I meet somebody? How do I meet a Mr. Johnson, a Dr. Gray? Like, how do I connect? Go on LinkedIn, look at different people from different agencies, hit them in their inbox and their DMs and say, I would love to connect with you. Can we set up an informational interview so I can talk to you about my career aspirations and perhaps you can help me? Maybe they can be the gatekeeper because we might have 150 applications. If I don't know you, if we don't know you, don't know your name, don't have a connection, why should we select you? Right? Just from what's on the paper in black and white. So make the effort to be part of these professional organizations, Blacks in Government, federally employed women, the African American Council for Executives, all the different professional organizations, accounting organizations, the MBA Association. Make the connection. Show up here, right, to the Congressional Black Caucus. We have employee fairs. The hiring managers are there, so that way they know your name. Attend the USA Jobs. Scroll on down to the bottom, go to events, and attend the USA Job events for training on interviews, training on resumes to meet the hiring officials. They have like the agency forums, but you have to make the effort. Use the USA Jobs template, right, for your resume. Make sure that you're searching what's out there, what jobs are available, so you understand the requirements. And I would tell you, start in high school, right? Start before you get to college, so you understand the internships. Sign up for internships, sign up for fellowships. If you're a recent graduate, sign up for the Presidential Management Fellowship Program or the Pathways Program. There's so many opportunities. And last but not least, I come from the intelligence agency, National Security Agency. Go on to intelligencecareers.gov, sign up for some of their entry level or pathways or internships programs. Look at the scholarship opportunities and apply for careers at the intelligence agencies.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. And I do hope our listeners will take heed to the wonderful and rich advice that you have given and say that they have, or they will, I should say, and they are given an opportunity to enter into the federal workforce. And let's look at it from the perspective that they're there and they want to grow. And Mr. Johnson, I know your books, which I don't believe you've talked a lot about, but deal with leadership and servant leadership. Yeah. So let's look at this from the perspective of someone who's already in the federal government and they want to look at professional development, which is something you touched on at the top of the podcast, and how you progressed in your career and how you had wonderful trainers and coaches and mentors to support you. So can you just talk about like servant leadership and leadership in general and how that will help you propel to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. So the beautiful thing about a federal career with the federal government is that there are a plethora of opportunities and a plethora of developmental programs. So depending on your own goals, dreams, and aspirations, there is some type of a program for you to be able to tap into, to help you to cultivate your skills, to get better, to see the larger landscape, to get comfortable with networking, understanding, building relationships, why you should get involved with membership organizations, and at the same time encourage you to perform at a satisfactory level to put yourself in a position for promotion. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a mouthful, but it's a process and it takes time, and we have to learn how to surround ourselves with like-minded men and women who are on a trajectory in their career, who want to serve and who want to be professional and diplomatic and tactful in all that we do. As a frontline leader, I was really fortunate and really blessed to come into the government through this intern program, and I was able to be promoted non-competitively for my first 4 years. I was a grade 11 before I had to apply for a grade 12. That's part of the government experience, the federal government experience. When I got it to be a mid-level leader around the grade 12 and 13, I went to my bosses because of my own aspirations. And I requested, after I had filled out all of the paperwork, to be approved for the executive potential program because I knew I wanted to be an executive. And so I just being proactive, no one in my agency had done it before. Others found out about it, got a little upset, but those that were in my chain supported it all the way up to the senior executive. But it didn't stop there. Once you get to the senior executive level, there are other opportunities, and there's so many different things to do and so many different functions to perform. It is absolutely, positively, unequivocally a great career to choose, because whether it's a civilian agency, a defense agency, or an intelligence community agency, there are ample opportunities, whether it's the executive branch, the judicial branch, or the legislative branch. There's so many opportunities there. So it's just a matter of grabbing the handlebars and getting on that bike and riding it and getting connected with the right people to help. And then when you get to your senior level, then you be the person to reach back and help others.
Yes.
And it was just an amazing career.
Wonderful. And I think you said 34-year career.
34 years.
Wow.
I looked up one day and everybody around me looked a little bit younger. And I said, it's time to go.
And I love that what he said about reaching back,
Yeah.
right? So when you wanted to elevate, your senior leadership supported you. And once you got to that level, you didn't stop. You continued to reach your hands down to offer a hand up, to pull people up to your level. Because guess what? You got to leave. You got to retire. You're preparing for that next generation.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about the federal government in terms of what I experienced and what I observed is that when they see us in the federal workplace applying ourselves, wanting to be our best, doing our best, without us asking, people just gravitate toward us to help. So having a chance to work with the Clinton administration and his first administration, having a chance to work with Marion Barry, the mayor of DC, and help them to establish a new procurement organization, being a part of the National Performance Review, testifying before Congress, before the Committee on Small Business, all of that came because my mentors and my coaches just saw something that was sparking in me, and they came alongside and they helped. And these are just opportunities that present themselves. And if I can do it, then everyone else can do it as well.
Yes.
There's a lot of nuggets of wisdom in there, and a couple of things resonate with me in terms of what you both said about reaching back and helping others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot to be said about that, because people can be what they see. So if they see us and we model that type of professional development and behavior that you spoke of, Mr. Johnson, I think that goes a long way into preparing the next generations of leaders. And then both of you, I think, touched on trainers and mentors and coaches. And Mr. Johnson, you had said finding like-minded individuals and those to help guide your careers. I look to you now, Dr. Gray, if you could speak about the relationships and the differences of a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor.
Yeah, so I am a certified coach, right? International Coach Federation, ACC certified, and my agency paid for us. So my agency, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, they have the best practice for coaching programs, over 65 coaches certified within our agency. But not just HUD, the whole entire federal government has a coaching program where OPM has the coaching distro where we reach out to each other. We coach for the CXO program for future executives, the OPM leadership development program. So we coach, and with coaching, we're not giving you the formula. Basically, we're saying, what is it that you want to do? What steps do you need to take in order to get to that next level? How can we support you? Like, what type of support or resources do you need? But also, how will you hold yourself accountable? That's the most important thing. How will you hold yourself accountable? So we're coaching them. We're helping to push them off the ledge. With mentorship, I'm helping you a little bit. I'm giving you the resources. I'm giving you the guidance. I'm telling you the formula, giving you step by step. And maybe you've seen something in me. And a lot of people say, well, how do I find a mentor or a coach? Again, you have to ask, reach out, reach out to people on LinkedIn, the coaching network at your agency, talk to your HR, your training division, training department, and your supervisor, right? but you don't necessarily want your supervisor mentoring you, because
Yeah.
that's the person that's guiding you. You want a mentor that really is maybe at a level that you want to go to. Maybe there's something inside that mentor, like maybe a personal mentor if you have personal things going on with your life. But I say have your starting five. Then you have that stakeholder. The stakeholder is that person that is advocating for you, that person that can open up the door for you, that person that's on the other side that says, you know what, I love Dr. Gray so much. I want her to be a SCS at my agency today. That is your stakeholder. You have to have that stakeholder in your pocket. So that should be part of your starting five: your mentor, your coach, your stakeholder, and I would say three mentors, right? At once, but people that really are looking out for you, that have your best interests, and really knowing the difference, right? Because each one serves a different purpose. And even though I am a coach, I'm not biased. I think you need all of it in order to excel and go to that next level.
Excellent. Now, I want to, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to um, add to this conversation the theme of this wonderful conference that we're attending, the Congressional Black Caucus annual legislative conference. And the theme for this year, of course, is From Vision to Victory, Amplifying Black Voices. And if we look at it in the perspective of this particular podcast topic, if you could speak to that theme and from your own personal experiences, how did you go from, and you may have touched on this a little, from a vision to the victory of having, both of you have had stellar careers and have stellar careers even after your retirement. If you could maybe add to some of what you've already said about how did you go from your vision to a successful career.
Well, I have to give my dad some of the kudos and some of the accolades. He always told me from the time I was ankle high, Kevin, be prepared. And long before I knew what those two words meant, I said, okay, Dad, I'll do that, not knowing what he was talking about. So I went through adolescence, I went through young adulthood, and it wasn't until I was in my 30s, and by that time I was a mid-level leader in the federal government, that it really clicked. And what Dad taught me, and in the spirit of this theme and the spirit of this podcast, what he was telling me is that, Kevin, it's always better to be prepared and not have an opportunity than it is to have an opportunity and not be prepared. And from that, what I've always done is I begin with the end in mind. So how do I, as a 23-year-old, in the first year of an intern program as a grade 5, become a senior executive? I begin with the end in mind. I listen, I observe, I do, I perform. We're talking about voices, right? Amplify those voices. Excellence, not perfection, but always striving to work toward my goal, dream, and aspiration. Where do I want to be? How do I get there? It's a plan and it's a process, because I don't want to get there and then be unprepared. And that's what Dad was teaching me. And so he's 87 today. He's doing well. He's a Marine. He still thinks he can take me. I use wisdom, and I let him believe that he can.
Yes.
Right.
Wow.
And that's a very valuable lesson that I have now as a father, have transitioned down to my sons. And they're young men now. They're kind of out on their own. But I always tell them, preparation will get you to success, however you define it, because success is subjective. It means different things to different people. But it's all about, again, being the example that you want to set for others. What you want others to be and do, you first do that, because people take cues on what they see more so than what they hear.
Yes.
And that's how I amplify my voice. That's how I got to victory. And that's really what this session is all about.
Love it. Love it. Be prepared. Be prepared.
Yep.
Dr. Gray?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to point out my father's name is Wayne Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Right. So it's interesting that we have that in common, because you're Kevin Wayne Johnson. My father's name is Wayne Johnson, and he was a Marine.
Okay.
Oh,
So you
wow.
already know excellent. Well, Air Force is excellence in all we do.
Right.
But my father set that foundation as well. Like I signed up for the Air Force when I was 16 years old. I knew what I wanted to do. I've always been very independent, very like steadfast and stubborn. I am signing up for the Air Force, and then I had to ask my parents permission, right, in order to go into the Air Force. But the one thing that both my parents taught me was to execute. Right. I thought about this the other day. I've never had to worry about anything. School clothes, food, housing, special activities, vacations. My parents always provided. They always taught me to execute, right? To commit. Like they make a commitment, they show up, they do it. They're the ones that the family is relying on to make sure things happen. So I carry that into my day-to-day when I was in the Air Force, and once I became a government civilian. Is excellence in all you do. So I make a plan, right? I'm setting my quarter 1 strategy plan for fiscal year 2025, October 1st. Like, what's my plan over the next quarter? What do I hope to accomplish? I do the individual development plans, or now the executive development plan. What classes do I need? What type of training do I need? What type of leadership development do I need? Communication, leadership, emotional intelligence. What books do I need to read, right, in order to progress? I'm seeing a couple of great books and authors, to include yours. I have to pick up your book, but also who do I need to network with? I put mentors on my EDP as well, as far as who do I need to get as my coach? Who do I need to get as my mentor? And what's my career goals over the next quarter? I'm trying to get to the SES level, right? So I've submitted 3 applications, submitted for the SES development program, but all of that is part of the plan. So now I'm checking off my goals day by day, right? What am I doing each day in order to work towards my goals? So that way I can realistically accomplish my goals. Many people fail in the area if they don't have clear-cut and strategic goals to get to that next level. So that's always been my vision, and the way that I execute the victory. I set the goals, I create those milestones, I take it step by step, day by day, in order to get to that endpoint.
I love how both of you have taken the conference theme and just nicely interwoven that with the topic of this podcast. So,
Yes.
so be prepared, set goals, execute, and that will enable you to forge a path and towards a career in government and in IT. And I think with some of our remaining time, I want to just touch on your respective books. And I know, Dr. Gray, you touched on yours at the top of the podcast. But if you could speak, Mr. Johnson, about your books.
Yes, Leadership with a Servant's Heart is a book that's written from the heart, because in colleges and universities and other developmental programs, I've noticed over the decades that we spend a lot of time on theory, practicum, and methodology on leadership. But we don't spend enough time on what does it take to lead a person, or lead people, or lead a team, or lead an organization that's comprised of people. So Servant's Heart has everything to do with showing up prepared to serve people. And when you lead from the heart, it goes beyond just the mind and subject matter expertise and what we know, but it gets into care, it gets into trust, it gets into listening, valuing, respecting, and also being compassionate and empathetic. Now, compassion and empathy does not make us weak as a leader. It makes us human. And when I say that, I get people's attention because we're not just workers. We're people. We show up every day with issues, with challenges, concerns. We're taking care of children. We're taking care of elderly parents. We have health issues. We might not be in our right state of mind. We just dealt with 90 minutes of traffic. And then we show up to work, and now somebody's dictating, mandating, and threatening as a way of trying to motivate us to get something done. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So Leadership with a Servant's Heart helps us to understand how we can align the mind, the acumen, and the intelligence with what's in the heart. So now we're leading the whole person, and it makes a difference. And the reason that we train and we coach and we mentor from that perspective is because we don't get that in school, and we need it. And it's, people are voting with their feet. They're leaving our organizations because of their leader, not the organization. They don't leave the agency. They don't leave the department. They're leaving a person who doesn't know how to treat them and doesn't give them the resources and the tools and the systems and the processes that they really need to succeed, and they know it. And so they're showing up and like, this person doesn't really care about me. They're not valuing my opinion and my thought and my perspective. Why am I wasting my time? I'm out of here. And that's happening often. And this is not a new thing. If you take a look at all the data from the EEOC going back 3 decades, the evidence is very clear. There's a disconnect between what leaders are delivering and what people are looking for in their leader.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, and thank you for sharing your book titles. And if you could just quickly remind the listeners about your book before we run out of time.
Yes. So my book is a guide to unlocking federal employment. So it's the beginning, right, where Mr. Johnson is talking about the end and in the transition and the build up to leadership. We talk about how to find the federal jobs, the different resources to include intelligencecareers.gov, USA Jobs, plus going to the agency websites. We talk about different private organizations like federally employed women, Blacks in government, how to stay connected, right? Your affinity groups, your employee resource groups, so you can not only grow in the government, but so that you can find your tribe and your community, and also the value base, right? What agency do you really want to work for? Do you understand the culture, the mission? Is that really where you want to be, right? And want to thrive and grow. So we talk about the whole person. We give you basically that step-by-step guide to not only get the government job, but to thrive and elevate to leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Gray, and thank you, Mr. Johnson. And as I said earlier, this has been a wonderful conversation with a lot of useful and rich advice and to help guide our listeners to the next steps in their careers. So thank you both for participating.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. You did excellent job as our moderator, and I
Yes.
appreciate your time.